All right. Hello, everyone. Okay. So here we go. In light of recent California wildfire events and action happening in the state of California with the LA wildfires, I just wanted to pop in, give some information on my background, on what I'm seeing in the market, a little bit of history on California wildfire and California insurance and reinsurance. I wanted to give some people a little bit of background of how absolutely insane this market has been for the last decade. Um, so I guess we'll jump right into it. I've got a little bit of an agenda. Let's throw the agenda up. Okay. Oh, hey, look, some people are here. 255 people coming to listen about California wildfire insurance and reinsurance. Okay, so this market is totally crazy. And I wanted to give some people some perspective so they can have an understanding of what's going on with the insurance market and the reinsurance market and why things are so crazy, right? I think there's been a lot of insanity of people talking about the insurance market and how crazy it is. And I just want to show people like exactly what's going on behind the scenes and how nuts it's been for like the last decade. So again, a little bit about me, my background, business and econ background. I got a job in reinsurance. I'm a reinsurance broker. So I sell and structure tranches of risk from insurance companies externally to reinsurance entities. So the entire goal is to, offset volatility on an insurance company's balance sheet. So, joined a reinsurance brokerage firm right out of college. And I've been working in reinsurance broking ever since. So it's about 11 years. And, the business that I've focused on and I've worked on has been primarily property and casualty West Coast business. I've worked on some nationwide things and some regional things, but primarily West Coast property and casualty business. So really, I've worked on wildfire my entire career, and I've been able to see what's happened in this marketplace for the last decade, which is just totally crazy. And people need to hear about this stuff because it's just totally nuts. So here's the agenda for today. We're going over the California wildfire insurance and reinsurance market. So talk a little bit about current status, obviously a huge wildfire in LA, insurance and reinsurance market history in California. So like just the dynamics of the marketplace. What's going on here? This thing is totally weird. Then talk about wildfire loss occurrence definitions, which gets crazy. We'll compare that to hurricanes, and then talk about the California Wildfire Fund and utility company involvement. So let's just jump right into it. I guess we might as well check the chat. Some people hanging out. Cool. All right. Was the LA fire this scale on your radar? Absolutely. This was absolutely on my radar. Any other questions real quick before we jump in here? All right, cool. Got no whiskey today, just tea. Thanks for joining. Okay, so I wanted to get into some statistics. All right, you guys got to know about this marketplace because this market is pretty nuts. So what I have on the screen, maybe I'll make it a little bit bigger so you can see this. So this is, there's so many things, but I'll go from left to right. So what I wanted to show here is the state of California insurance market was the most profitable market in the entire United States prior to the year 2017. Okay, these are these red squares here on the left-hand side, 2017, 2018. And, there was a significant kind of gold rush to the California insurance market, right? This economy is just exploding. You've got Silicon Valley is exploding. People are moving to California left and right. Population is expanding super rapidly. People are moving there. And largely there were no big catastrophes, right? There was a big earthquake in 1989, 1994, Northridge earthquake as well. But after that, I mean, there really wasn't very many large catastrophes in the state of California. So that led to a really big string of profitability. So this is what you're looking on the screen here. This is homeowners line of business loss ratio over time. Okay, so you could see in 2004 loss ratio 31%. In 2007, 2008, there were some medium-sized wildfires that happened. I think there was called the Witch Fire that happened in that year, 2007 or 2008. So it led to some losses. But then 2009 happened, back to a 36% loss ratio, and then there was a string of just 4 or 5 years in a row of incredibly profitable California business. Right, insurance companies are running really profitably. Got a loss ratio of 43%, 42%, 45%, 47%. For those that are unaware of loss ratio, what loss ratio means is you take all of your premium income, so you get premium in the door, and you have to pay losses out. Okay, so it's the proportion of loss relative to the premium that you bring in the door. So that gets you that loss ratio figure. Loss ratio figures are a good metric for how insurance companies are managing their portfolio or their balance sheet. On top of loss ratio, insurance companies also have to pay expenses, right? So this isn't like, one minus this figure isn't profit. You also have to factor in expenses. Most expense ratios on average are around 30% expense ratio. So getting back into the meat and potatoes here, in came 2015. 2015, there was Valley Butte wildfire that happened. It led to some losses in the market. It wasn't very big of an event. Everybody just kind of brushed it off, and it's like, oh, it must be like a 2008 size event, whatever. 2016 happened. I think there were a couple of small wildfires. Again, not that big of a deal. And then 2017 rolls around. Okay, 2017 was totally nuts. Somebody asked this question, 100% would be a total loss of profit. Absolutely. So 2017 was totally nuts. So a loss ratio of 201%. So the California industry for homeowners in California brought in $7.6 billion of premium, and they paid out $15.3 billion of loss. So the entire industry in California lost, just on the homeowners line, they lost $7.7 billion in 2017 alone, just from loss, right? And then you have to factor in expense ratio. So you've got an expense ratio on top of that. So really the profit margin that the insurance market was operating in 2017 was a negative 131% profit margin. So the industry effectively lost $10 billion on the homeowners line alone in 2017. So if you look at this column here, I've created this column called net profit. So what this column of net profit does is it takes, the loss ratio plus the average expense ratio of 30%, and it gets you to a profit margin percentage on that individual year. And then I backed into a net profit dollar figure relative to the earned premium. So as you can see in this cell here for 2017, just the year 2017, right? The year 2017 effectively erased the prior 9 years of profit, right? That was a incredible string of profitability. Everything's good. Everybody's making money. California's great. Like, these insurance companies are just like, hell yeah, hell yeah, hell yeah. Boom, 2017 rolls around and you get absolutely obliterated. Like, it's not even close, right? Like, you just get absolutely obliterated by these huge wildfires. So, and then 2018 rolls around. Everybody's like, oh my God, 2017. Oh, so horrible. Like, Jesus Christ, maybe we'll get a nice good year. It won't be that bad. And 2018 rolls around. So in 2017, the wildfires were in Santa Rosa. So just like wine country. You can imagine wine country. And in 2018, we had the Paradise wildfire. So this is, the entire town of Paradise is wiped out. Just a totally crazy, like 2 back-to-back years of just absolutely getting smacked in the face. So in 2018, you had $7.9 billion of effectively net loss on the homeowners line of business. So, everybody thinks these insurance companies are just incredibly profitable enterprises, and they're just like stealing all this money from all these people. But really, like, the math here isn't good, right? Like, this is not a sexy business model. If you look at the total, just looking at the line in California, the total weighted net profit margin from 2023 back to 2004 is 9.1%. Okay. Just if you take the pure average, it's 10%. And if you take the standard deviation on that number, your standard deviation is 44.6%. So that means that, while on average you get, 9% return, 10% return, you can have a 100% loss year, like 130% loss year. That's a horrible proposition. Like that's so much volatility just to get 9% return on this line of business. That's just an incredible amount of volatility that is really difficult to manage. And I'll explain why it's difficult to manage, and it kind of comes into this reinsurance perspective. Prior to 2017, and let's go back to our agenda here, right? Okay, so that's market history, just thinking about statistics. And let's talk about wildfire loss occurrence definitions, and then we'll get back into this. So wildfire loss occurrence definitions. So let's bring up our Google Earth. Okay, so this is a pretty crazy scenario here, right? So wildfire loss occurrence definitions. One of the biggest challenges in the reinsurance market in managing the volatility of an insurance company's balance sheet is how on earth, as a reinsurer, do you define a wildfire event? How do you do it? And this is far more complicated than many people probably even care about or even understand. So, for example, like in 2017, some of the wildfires that happened, I believe that was the year with Woolsey and the Santa Rosa fires at the same time. So you had Malibu and Santa Rosa burning at the exact same time. So Santa Rosa up here north of San Francisco, and then Malibu down here in just kind of the LA County. So you have these events that are occurring at the same time period, right? All of these, the Santa Ana winds and the Diablo winds blew at the exact same time. And you had these exact same wind conditions, and then these fires just exploded out of nowhere during the same time period. And there were a lot of questions on like, okay, well, are these the same conditions? Is it the conditions that would result in the wildfire, or is it the ignition? How do you separate like wildfire events, right? Like, is one wildfire outline a wildfire event, or is two wildfire outlines? If the two wildfires with separate, outlines happen at the same time, can I combine those into one single event? Like if I have a loss in Santa Rosa and a loss in LA, can I combine those into one event? And that has a really big impact on, how a company may purchase reinsurance to protect their downside. So in 2017, the wildfire loss occurrence definition for wildfires in California and any state for that matter was 250-mile radius. It was 10 days, so 240 hours, and a 250-mile radius. So I'm going to show you how big a 250-mile radius is. This is a 250-mile radius. Maybe I'll restart. This is a 250-mile radius. Look how big that is. So in 2017, if you wanted to, if you're an insurance company, and let's say you had a wildfire here up in Paradise, and a wildfire over here in Oakland, and a wildfire here down in Santa Barbara, and they all happen at the exact same time, you can combine all of those events in 3 completely separate different locations into one single loss occurrence. So think about how crazy that is, right? Like imagine you've got, tens of millions, $1 billion loss up here and $1 billion loss up here and $1 billion loss down here. That has a really big impact on the total size of the event, right? If it's like large or small. And Reinsurers quickly realized after the 2017 wildfire season, holy shit, this is unsustainable. We can't do this. And so what happened after that time period is, 2017 happened. Everybody was like, holy moly, we just got hit by a ton of loss. And then the Paradise Fire happened in 2018. The Paradise Fire, let's clear this. Let's look at Paradise. Oh, let's look at Paradise. Where is it? Paradise here. Okay. Paradise Fire. Boom. Okay. So Paradise, this one was crazy. So this area is about it's a radius of 8 miles. So it's 16 miles across, 16-mile diameter, about 200 square miles. There are about 15,000 risks that were in this circle that got destroyed in the Paradise wildfire. 15,000 risks. That's like a 95% damage ratio in this area. This was a really big miss by a ton of insurance companies. Like this area over here in Paradise was ranked by wildfire models as like not very risky. And so what had happened was there were a few insurance companies that were just incredibly concentrated in this location in Paradise. And I think what happened was, looking at the extreme profitability that happened over time, right? In the homeowners line in California, insurance companies got greedy and they found little pockets of business where they could be really profitable. And then they just started writing a bunch of business without thinking about where they could potentially have aggregations of risk that can result in an enormous loss, an enormous wildfire loss. So the reason I bring up aggregation is because you remember what we just said about the wildfire loss occurrence definition. And what happened was we had there was an insurance company that after the Paradise wildfire, they realized that they were insolvent. And what I mean by insolvent is they had more losses than their entire surplus plus the amount of reinsurance that they purchased, aka they weren't going to be able to pay the claims of the policyholders that had losses. This is a really scary, this is totally incredibly scary, right? So naturally, what they did is tried to bend the rules of the wildfire loss occurrence definition. So they said, okay, we hear you on your circles. And they took one circle up here in Northern California and chopped the Paradise wildfire in half. Okay. And then they took another circle down over here in like Nevada and chopped it in half. And they called these two separate circles, the Northern California and over this one over here with the centroid in Nevada, they called these two separate circles, two separate events. And so what they did is they split the Paradise fire, even though this is very clearly one fire. They split the fire in half with two separate circles, and they ceded loss to their reinsurance tower twice. And as you can imagine, this totally pissed off all of the reinsurers. It was like a little bit of a loophole in the design of the reinsurance contract. It wasn't clear on whether or not you can have two circles like split the loss. So, what do you do if you're insolvent? You bend the rules, right? You figure out a way to stay alive. And that equation, I think at the time was worth the risk of ceding two losses to the reinsurance market and totally tattooing the reinsurance market. So that really soured a lot of the reinsurance market. I mean, capital after the 2018 wildfire event, capital began to flee. So the reinsurance costs right? The cost of reinsurance was just rocketed like overnight after 2018. I mean, the cost of reinsurance in everywhere rocketed because of the uncertainty in how to price these wildfires. Because there's multiple problems here with wildfire. If you think about it, there's there's so many problems. There's so many problems with wildfire, but how do you define it, right? Who defines it? How do you define it? Who defines it? Um, like, is it wind conditions that cause it, or is it, is a different cause of loss? Does cause of loss even matter? Is smoke damage included? Where do you draw the line of like what can be included and what can't be included? Um, and then you also have like so many other things that come into play, like demand surge, wildfire fighting cost, uh, just all of these different variables. So, and I'm going to show you a quick video on just why, like, why this is so just incredibly difficult um, to manage. And we'll talk through this. We'll talk about this a little bit more. So this is a video from somebody's house in the Malibu fire, and this is just one of the scariest videos I've ever seen. And I was just totally. I think these people are okay, but Jesus, look at this. You can't run away from that. And yeah, man, it's just super scary. So freaking scary. So the reason I show that is because maybe I'll pop back up. Um, the reason I show that is because it shows like the intensity with some of these wildfire events. The wildfires happen very quickly. They happen very fast. They can move incredibly quickly, and you can have no idea that they're coming. It could just be on you, and like a wind event can sneak up. Diablo winds could come out of nowhere, and there was a car backfire caused a fire to start, and you got 80, 100-mile-an-hour winds. All of a sudden, you're hot. You're back. The fire's in your backyard, and you can't move, and you got to go. And that's volatility, right? That's just like a super volatile event. And if you think about this in comparison to like other catastrophes, like hurricanes, right? Hurricanes, with some degree of certainty, you can predict where the thing is going to hit. And with some degree of certainty, 5 days in advance, 4 or 5 days in advance. And like as the hurricane continues to move, you can alert people. You can let people know, like, hey, you need to evacuate. There's a good chance you got a Category 5 hurricane. It's going to hit us. It's going to cause a lot of damage. And with hurricane, you also have this. You have wind fields, right? So you've got different wind fields, and with the different wind fields, so closest to the eye is a really heavy wind field, right? You got, it might be 180-mile-an-hour wind, like right next to the eye, but it drops off pretty drastically as you get further away from the eye wall, and you can begin to quantify and calculate estimated damage to homes that are going to get hit from hurricanes, and you can run simulations on an entire portfolio where you can model, a hurricane going over a portfolio 10,000 times, and you can get a probabilistic distribution of what the outcomes might be. And you have these models have been around for 30 years, and they've gotten very sophisticated over the last 30 years. There's a lot of science that goes into it. There's a company on the East Coast that they literally have jet engines, and they like blow air at they build homes, blow air at them, and like try to knock the homes down to get an understanding of like damage ratio on these homes. Now, fire Fire is just so much different and so much more volatile and so much harder to predict. And you have 0 degree of certainty on any of this information. You have, like, if you think about, again, about hurricane, where are hurricanes going to have the most damage? It's going to be on the coast. Now, where is a wildfire going to have the most damage? It could be anywhere. It could be just completely anywhere. And it can happen very quickly. It could be wind driven, which can create its own weather systems. So how wind works, right? If you look at California, Central Valley is a valley, and you got the mountains on both sides, and you've got some heat down in the valley, and you've got cool air up in the mountains, and you've got changing pressure systems that causes wind. So the hot air goes to the cold air goes to the hot air, and it creates this kind of wind system. And you've got different geographic terrain. You've got different fuel loads and fuel moisture and fuel types. And all of these things can be challenging all at the same time. And it makes it really difficult for a reinsurer to try to grasp like, how do I quantify this, right? Like I just said, with hurricanes, you can run a stochastic simulation. You run 10,000 simulations over a portfolio, and you're like, okay, I know about what my risk is, like with some degree of certainty. Now, again, with wildfire, how do you model this event that's happening in LA? Like, how do you model it? Like, there's you have no way. You can throw tons of data and science at this, and people are trying to throw tons of data and science at this, but the real difficulty is it's hard to simulate. It's like incredibly hard to simulate and predict with any degree of certainty. You can have wildfires like all over the place, and again, like, how do you quantify it? And if you think about the potential, again, downside scenarios here, like, knock on wood, like, worst case scenario in this potential like LA event, and I wouldn't wish this in any scenario, but is worst case scenario is you have an earthquake happen at the same time, and this would just completely destroy any modeled scenario that you would ever have. And there are some models out there that think about, okay, what's the probability that there's an earthquake that causes fire during a wind scenario? And that really starts to scare capital, right? Like, you think about the volatility and like, what's my return? What's my upside here? What's my upside in this market if this risk is just so volatile? Like, how do I make money in this market? And I think that is a good segue to the next topic, which is getting into market structure. So market structure is pretty nuts too. So I'm just going to share my screen. Let's go back to this. Well, you guys don't need to see the whole thing. Okay. So insurance and reinsurance market. Okay. Market structure: admitted versus non-admitted market, and the FAIR plan. So let's talk about this for a minute. And maybe I'll move myself over there. So the admitted market, the admitted insurance market has to file forms and rates with the state. And I'll go back over here. I like that better. So the admitted market has to file forms and rates with the state. So if you were looking to write business in California, let's just say Sacramento, and you wanted to charge a certain rate, you have to file your relative rate for, that type of risk in that location. You have to file that with the state, and you have to get it approved. The state has to approve you of charging that rate in that location or that type of risk. And that's the admitted marketplace. So the admitted market is kind of like the first line of defense in the insurance market. So most policies in like urban areas Like if you live in the city, like in LA Basin or Sacramento or SF, you're probably getting insurance in the admitted market. And this admitted market is to provide some, structure and framework to make sure that the insurance citizens aren't getting price gouged. This is like just a general structure in the entire U.S. Insurance market. So, and then you think about the non-admitted market. So you've got the admitted market that you got to file rates and forms, and then you've got the non-admitted market. And the non-admitted market, you could think of this as like wild, wild west. Okay, this is wild, wild west of insurance rates. You can charge whatever you want. It doesn't have to get approved by the regulator, and you could charge anything. But in order for a policy to go from the admitted market to the non-admitted market, you have to get declined by like 2 or 3 admitted carriers in order to transform that risk over into the non-admitted market. Again, to protect consumers. And then if you can't, so basically, if you can't get insurance in the admitted market, you have to go to the non-admitted market to get insurance. For many of these incredibly risky risks, like if you live in the forest or the woods, or even like on where this fire is right now, you probably struggled to get any insurance, period. Like the admitted market just didn't exist, right? Like there's no way that the regulator in the region would approve the rates that the insurance companies need to actually get in order to write that business. So most of the business in this risky area is non-admitted business. But if you lived in a really risky location, there's a high likelihood that you couldn't get insurance from either the admitted market or the non-admitted market. So where do you go? Like, what do you do? You have to go to the residual market, or the insurer of last resort, which is the California FAIR Plan. And the California FAIR Plan is the insurer of last resort, and they provide basically like a really stripped down policy. It's like really basic. Their coverage is okay. They offer limits up to $3 million of total insured value for a homeowner, up to $20 million for a commercial property. And so if you're a high value homeowner, like somebody that lives in, the impacted location right now, like Pacific Palisades, and you have a $10 million home, you can get a $3 million policy from the FAIR Plan. Let's just say you couldn't get insurance anywhere else. And then you have to take the remaining exposure net. You've got $7 million of risk that you got to take net. And I'm a bit concerned about that marketplace right now. I think this could be a really, really sad, like underinsured loss in LA. So again, going back to the FAIR Plan. So let's think about the FAIR Plan a bit. Like the dynamics with the FAIR Plan are just insane as well. So, God, this whole market's so crazy. So the California FAIR Plan, the insurance, the residual market, insurance of last resort. This is not a government entity. It's kind of like a pseudo government entity. And it's kind of run by all of the insurance companies in the state. And so the FAIR Plan, they charge like way under actuarially sound rates. Okay, so the California FAIR Plan, they charge like a policy that's in the woods. They'll charge it like an elevated rate, but it'll be pretty similar to something that's in like urban territory. So like the FAIR Plan is just totally underpriced. And again, it's meant to just be the last resort for anybody that can't get insurance. And the FAIR Plan, what they do on the back end, so right, they're taking in all this premium, they purchase reinsurance. Okay, they try to buy as much reinsurance as they possibly can with the premiums that are coming in the door. Now, they only buy reinsurance to the 1 in 40 year return period. I'm going to say that again. That's probably confusing for some people, but they buy reinsurance to the 1 in 40 year return period. Most other insurance companies in the entire US market purchase reinsurance up to the 1 in 130 year return period, depending on your rating, or the 1 in 250 year return period, depending on your rating. And again, the reason for insurance companies buying so high to such high return periods is to protect their balance sheet. Somebody said here, fair plan. Oh yeah. Somebody mentioned on the fair plan in the chats. Yeah, it's totally right. So again, the fair plan, they buy up to the 1 in 40 year return period. They are like wildly under reinsured because they can't afford it. They're not getting actuarially sound rates on the front end. So they buy as much reinsurance as they can, but it doesn't buy that much. It doesn't buy that much coverage. So as you can see, that this is starting to an issue is starting to brew here. I've been sounding the alarm on this for years, but I've gotten pushed to the side. So why is this an issue? In 2017, the California Fair Plan had 80,000 risks. Fast forward to 2024, the California Fair Plan has 400,000 risks. Okay. Think of how crazy that is. Let's just say average math, got 80,000, just say average value in California is $1 million. What is that? 80 billion. Got to turn my phone sideways, my calculator. That's $80 billion. Now that number goes from 80,000 risks to 400,000 risks in like 5 years. And that $80 billion of exposure goes from 80 billion to 400 billion. That's a lot of exposure in a very short period of time. And it indicates how dislocated the market is and how screwed up the entire California market is. Like the amount of exposure that's been funneled into the fair plan. It's like totally crazy. And you think about like, why did it happen? Why did it explode? It exploded because in 2018, based on all of the stuff that we've just gone through, the insurance market just totally blew up from the Paradise wildfire. Reinsurance capital totally evacuated. Loss occurrence definitions changed super rapidly. The regulatory environment got really challenging where the admitted market needed to raise their rates, but they weren't getting the ability to raise their rates. So you had insurance companies just start non-renewing business and fleeing the state. And all of this was just happening at the same time. And it just got super crazy. And like all this capital left the market because it just wasn't profitable to do business. And like the regulatory environment was just super challenging. So the fair plan has ballooned, totally ballooned. And if you think about the risks that are in there, it's the worst of the worst. It's the shit that can't get insurance. So this fair plan is just absolutely just like totally ballooned. And they do not have the infrastructure to handle the total ballooning of all of these risks. So this is going to be a big issue. This is going to be a really big issue. So the fair plan purchases as much reinsurance as they possibly can. I think they buy the 1 in 40 year return period. Anything in excess of the 40-year return period, if there's a loss in excess of the 40-year return period, that loss is what's the word? Assessed. That excess loss is assessed on all homeowners insurance writers in the state, admitted homeowners insurance writers in the state. So you could start to imagine how crazy this gets, because let's say you have an urban portfolio and you're a homeowners, you write homeowners business in the state of California. Let's say you're a company like Lemonade and you write homeowners business in Sacramento only. Let's just say Sacramento, just keep it simple. Like you got no wildfire exposure at all, but you just so happen to write, 0.01% of the homeowners market in the state of California. Now you can have an industry event like this that happens to the California Fair Plan. It blows up the entire Fair Plan's reinsurance program. Let's just say, boof, tattooed, like the whole reinsurance program gone. And then let's just say you have a $10 billion loss to the California Fair Plan. You now have $8 billion of exposure that's going to get assessed on everybody that's writing business, homeowners business in the state of California. That's a huge issue. You can not even have any exposure to this loss in California, in LA, but you can have this huge assessment on your book just because you wrote homeowners business in the state. And it's insane. I mean, it's just it's a huge exposure that I think many insurance companies underestimated, and I think still probably continue to underestimate. Again, let's think about this 40-year return period. Why is the 40-year return period important? And like, give me a sense of scale. The 40-year return period, just to put it into perspective, the reinsurance models that exist for wildfire, again, they're not very good. They modeled the Paradise wildfire as a 1 in 100-year event. They modeled the Santa Rosa wildfire as like a 1 in 60-year event, something like that. So the 17 and 18 fires, just to give a sense of scale, were very, very large from a modeled perspective. I think this LA fire that's happening right now is probably a modeled 1 in 200-year event, 1 in 300-year event. And I think there's a decent likelihood that the California Fair Plan has a loss well in excess of their reinsurance program. And there's a significant assessment on the insurance companies that write homeowners business in the state of California. So I think this is going to be, I mean, this is really sad. And it's incredibly sad. This is going to like totally sting everyone in the entire California marketplace. If you have insurance anywhere in the state of California, you're going to get hit by increased rates or, changes in the insurance dynamics in the market, fair plan viability into the future. Capital may continue to flee because of the volatility. The political regime is really challenging to get rate approvals. You can't include reinsurance costs in your upfront rate allocations. It's just a really challenging market to do business. And at the same time, it's really challenging to write business in the state. And the reinsurance market has just complete flexibility with rates. So insurance market moves really slow. The reinsurance market has full flexibility. They can charge and raise rates like whenever they wanted, as quickly as they wanted. They could go as high as they wanted. And that market is just a lot more flexible. The reinsurance market's a lot more flexible with capital than the insurance market is. So yeah, I think this is going to cause a huge riff in the design and structure of the existing insurance and reinsurance market in the state of California. It's going to be pretty crazy, like not in a good way. And I could see some downstream impacts in so many different things. What makes this fire particularly crazy is, in my opinion, the rebuilding these homes. So let's say you've got all of these losses, right? These are all in high value. This is like a high value area. Malibu is a high value area. Let's just say average TIV is 10 million bucks. You've got these high-end homes that have just evaporated, incinerated. And if you want to rebuild them, they take like a very specific skill set to rebuild these homes. These are like very unique niche homes with like fancy architects, high quality materials, big windows and glass that's just like all custom. You have like steel infrastructure. You probably want to, change the living environment, and the downstream impact of the complexity of this loss is just so vast. It's going to take forever to rebuild this, like 5 to 10 years. And even then, I don't even know like what it looks like. Like, what does it look like 5 to 10 years from now? Do people move? Like, does population shift and change? Like, does that area rebuild at all? I mean, it's still a lovely place to live down in California, but um, I think a lot of people are going to rethink kind of how they live their lives, especially with the downstream impacts, just kind of all over the place. And this is really sad. I like people lose their homes. The real estate market's going to be impacted. Think about like the people selling high end real estate. Like your inventory in that area just like evaporated. Somebody asked a really good question. Won't this affect home values eventually as insurance rates skyrocket? Then values will need to adjust down to account for increased insurance costs. Yeah, I think that is a very likely. I think that is a very likely scenario. For example, you could look at homes in Florida, a very similar situation. You've got an insurance nightmare there in Florida as well, where the cost of insurance is just astronomical. And that's, I think, totally impacted house values over in that area. So the dynamics in California are just so challenging because of what is it called? Prop 13. Oh my God, California is just a fucking nightmare. Just the whole thing's a nightmare. So Prop 13 is I think it's Prop 13 is property taxes in the state of California. So, and what this means in the state of California, when you buy property in California, your property taxes are fixed the year you buy that home, and the property tax value can only increase 2% each year. So what do we know about CPI and inflation and the money supply? Well, the money supply has increased 6.5% a year. So that's created this like inflated home value in the state of California, right? Like all these people bought homes, hard assets in California. The property tax only went up 2%, but the value of the home is rocketing. It's going up like 10, 15, 20%. And that creates a really strange dynamic in the real estate market where you are incentivized to not move, especially if the market's moved on you. So imagine a scenario, you grew up in San Jose, California, your family bought a home for $150,000. That home in San Jose is now worth $3 million. But the job that your family has is still the same. And if you were to sell your home for $3 million, great, good for you. You just made a ton of money. But if you want to live in another house, you have to you'd probably buy an equal home. And if you did, then your new tax rate is a function of your new home price. And if your income didn't move with move at the same rate as your property tax rate may increase, you're shit out of luck. You're totally shit out of luck. And this dynamic is, you could see it everywhere. Like, I encourage anybody, if you haven't been to California, just like go around in different neighborhoods and just kind of think about it a little bit, because you could see it. Like, you can literally see it. I encourage anybody to go to Hollywood and walk around the neighborhoods in Hollywood, and you can see these just like piles of trash, like a piece of trash home right next to like a $5 million beautiful home. And then you have a piece of trash home right next to it. And it may be valued at $3 million. And then it looks like a just totally rundown place. And there's got a family living there and they like can't afford to keep it up and all this stuff. And then you think about, well, it makes sense. Like, they bought that home in 1990 and they literally can't afford to move. They can't afford to move. So, I mean, this like the whole situation is just totally screwed, right? Like, if these people start moving to different locations and they've got these big insurance claims and all of the stuff, like, this whole thing is just totally convoluted and wonky and weird. Um, I'm gonna go back into this insurance marketplace, and this one final piece here that makes things even just more and more complicated is the California Wildfire Fund, and the utility company involvement. Okay, this gets crazy. So, um, we're just go full solo. I'll turn my thing off. Okay, so the California Wildfire Fund and the utility company involvement. So the 2017 and 2018 wildfires that happened in the state of California, they were deemed utility caused. So they were deemed utility caused, meaning that PG&E. So you've got three large utility providers in the state of California: PG&E, SoCal Edison. PG&E has 2/3 of the exposure. That's like most of Northern California. SoCal Edison down in Southern California, and then Sempra, which is down in like San Diego area. And the 2017 and 2018 wildfires were deemed utility caused. That means like this utility infrastructure. So PG&E, they have these like electricity lines that are running all over the state, right? They're running all over the place. And you had these high wind events, 80, 100 mile an hour wind up in the mountains. And you had this situation called line slap. So you've got these lines that are kind of swinging, and then they slap each other and cause a spark. Spark falls to the ground, starts and lights a fire in the middle of the forest. Boom, Bob's your uncle, 80 mile an hour wind. The whole place is on fire. You got a 1,000,000-acre fire, and it's uncontrollable because it's up in the mountains. You can't fight it. It's going from crown to crown of these trees, and it's just impossible to stop this stuff. It's like these fires burn incredibly hot, 2,000 degrees. They'll melt steel. Like they're really, really scary, move really quick. So, given that these wildfires were caused by utility companies, so the whole dynamic is so crazy. Given that these wildfires were caused by utility companies, insurance companies were like, "Oh, great, I've got somebody to sue." So insurance companies have all these losses, right? Like Paradise burns down. Insurance company goes, "Oh my God, I'm going to go out of business. I need to sue somebody for fault. Somebody's at fault. Like PG&E, you're at fault. You're negligent. You should have had weather stations on this, and you should have prevented this fire from ever happening. Or like maybe your pole fell down, and you should have been maintaining your pole, or like clearing brush, or doing all this stuff." So, as you can imagine, this was an absolute disaster for the utility companies in the state of California. So, write this down. Hold on. You start to understand how convoluted this whole freaking problem is. You got utility problems, real estate problems, tax problems, insurance problems. Okay, back to the utility companies. So all of a sudden PG&E is like, "Oh my God, I've got a $15 billion loss on my hands. Like I literally am insolvent. Like I can't do this." PG&E, in a weird scenario, is a publicly traded company, but they provide a service for the people of California. And on like, what's the state of California going to do? Like let 2/3 of their state go without power? No. All right. So like what, how do you like, where's the money come from? Who has the money? Like who's paying this loss to all these insurance companies that are suing the utility company? So PG&E had a huge problem. They're like, "Oh my God, I don't know what to do here." They had a reinsurance program. They blew through their reinsurance program, and they had losses in excess of their reinsurance program. At this instance, in 2018, when it was deemed utility caused, the investment companies, so the or the rating agencies, were threatening the state of California and the utility companies that they were going to drop the credit rating on the bonds that they offer the market from investment grade to junk bond status, which is a huge issue. So if you have investment grade bonds and you're a utility company, that means you can raise capital very cheaply, 6-8%, let's say. Now, if you're junk bond status, if you needed to raise $1 billion of capital, you might have to pay 15%, 20% interest. Like the amount of interest you may have to pay may double or triple. Why is this a problem? This is a problem because what does a utility company do with increased cost of capital? They pass 100% of that cost onto the consumer. And as you can imagine, the state of California was like, oh my God, this is such a huge problem. We can't have that happen. We can't have like that. We can't have the utility company go from investment grade down to junk bond status, because now the cost of everybody's electricity in Northern California is just going to absolutely skyrocket. So what do we need a backstop? Like we need to set something up that protects the utility companies in case this happens, just so the rating agencies don't downgrade them to junk bond status. So what the state of California did was they set up a $21 billion wildfire fund to protect utility companies from utility-caused wildfires. Half of that fund, so $21 billion, half of it came from utility companies. So let's just say $10.5 million came from utility companies. $10.5 million came from consumers. Basically, everybody in the state paid like a $2.50 tax or fee, like on their utility bill, and all of that. And it's like for the next 15 years, like you pay. People in California, I think it's called like DWP or something, Department of Water Power. I don't know exactly what the fee is. Like it's $2.50, and it's for the next 15 years, and all of that capital is going to this $21 billion fund. The other $10 billion is put into the fund by the utility companies, the big three utility companies. In order for a utility company to be able to access this fund, they have to take a $1 billion annual aggregate deductible. So they got to take $1 billion of loss before they can access the fund. And additionally, they have to prove that they're meeting safety requirements for managing their exposure. So you got to like put micro weather stations out everywhere. You got to improve your lines, clear debris. Like you got to, there's like a huge list of all these things you got to do. So naturally, the utility companies effectively got bailed out by this backstop, but really the consumers in the state got bailed out, and they got a tax of additional cost that's just spread out over time via this utility bill, additional cost, as opposed to letting the free market drop the investment quality from investment grade to junk bond status, which would significantly change the cost of electricity in the state. So it's awful out there. It's totally freaking awful out there. Everything's bad. Everything's bad in the California market, particularly surrounding this exposure, right? Like the wildfire exposure impacts so many aspects of just like all parts of the economy. It's just a huge problem that just like exacerbates itself. And the affordability problem is an issue too. So like because of the tax situation, it also decreases affordability. So what do people do when there's less affordable homes and like shelter? You move to where it's cheaper. And where has it historically been cheaper? It's in more risky areas like Paradise Wildfire, or like you move further into more exposed locations. And that's just created this bullseye. The bullseye for potential wildfire losses has just increased rapidly because of just the entire market dynamics. So I just wanted to get on and like explain what's going on in this marketplace, just because it's so nuts. It's just totally nuts, and it's so convoluted. All of these pieces are intertwined and connected, and it's political, and it's economics and it's reinsurance and it's insurance and it's legal and, rating agencies and tax and, all of these different components are all tying into each other. And it's just it's chaos. It's total chaos. My thoughts and prayers are out to everybody who's impacted from these wildfires. It's so incredibly sad. I couldn't, I can empathize with the situation. I've been following these wildfires in this market for the last 11 or 12 years. And just seeing the stuff on the news or like on Twitter, just like it hurts. Like you can really feel the emotion. It's a much crappier peril to follow than like hurricane. Like the hurricane people are crazy. Some people will withstand a hurricane. They'll be out there like holding American flags and stuff. Like that's just totally Florida. But like they chose that. They made that decision. Like you can make a decision whether or not to leave with a hurricane, and with a wildfire you can't. And so some of my friends are impacted. Anders, like, hope you're doing okay, man. And I just couldn't imagine the stress of having to deal with that stuff. I have to deal with I have to deal with the market, which is just stressful enough. I couldn't imagine actually having to like deal with losing a home or like having to uproot your entire life and redo everything, or lose your retirement, or memories, the whole thing. It's just catastrophic, totally catastrophic. So yeah, I encourage everybody to be sympathetic. This is just and these people, while they are wealthy, their lives are forever changed, and they will never forget the stress. Like you're going to try to, these people are going to try to go to sleep for the next 3, 4, 5, 10 years and have dreams about this stuff. I don't wish that on anybody. That's just horrible. Anybody that's experienced anything catastrophic or had to deal with anxiety, like that stuff sticks with you. Bad events stick with you. And that's a pretty harrowing event. So hope everybody's okay. And I hope you found this informational and useful. Maybe I'll talk about it more. And yeah, here we go. Thanks for hanging out. Catch you later.